being a registered Republican does not mean that you are a bad person. Or maybe Jesus Christ should not be played by a self-described queer bisexual black woman. And if the left continues along these lines, they will continue to backlash their way into minority status, politically speaking. You know, a lot of folks have tried to figure out exactly why the Donald Trump phenomenon happened. Donald Trump has been the most transformative political figure of the 21st century, without a doubt. It was going to be Barack Obama, and then Trump came in and he's completely remade American politics and global geopolitics. But what led to the Trump phenomenon in the first place? There have been a lot of attempts to philosophize Trump. Maybe it was all about economic grievances in the Midwest. Maybe it was all about offshoring. Maybe it was all about tariffs or about immigration. The reality is that the biggest thing that drove Donald Trump to victory in 2016 and then again in 2024 is the fact that the left went culturally insane. The reality is the backlash to the left is not an economic program alone. In fact, it is predominantly not an economic program. The backlash to the left is less about tax rates than it is about a generalized feeling that the left was trying to dissolve the culture of the United States. Traditional basic things like men are not women, like there is such a thing as America and America is good. Like the idea that, for example, Christianity ought to be held with a high level of esteem. Right? These are certain things that Americans took for granted, things like church, apple pie, baseball, the flag, right? All the stuff that people used to think was corny. And then the left decided it's not just corny, it's bad. And then it turns out most Americans don't think that. Why do I bring this up? Because you're seeing this all crystallized in what I would term a culture division between the Sydney Sweeney Americans and the Cynthia Erivo Americans. Now, to be fair to Cynthia Erivo, so Cynthia Erivo, I've praised her before. She's a terrific actress. She really is unbelievably talented. She's a great singer and all of the rest. But Cynthia Erivo, who is British, has become emblematic, I would say, of the sort of left-wing social value belief system. This became a hot issue online over the course of the last 48 hours because she was the star of a production of Jesus Christ Superstar, which is a musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber. Really interesting musical, actually, by Andrew Lloyd Webber from the 70s. And this production at the Hollywood Bowl of Jesus Christ Superstar, which is, by the way, as a musical, quite respectful to Christian traditions. It is not meant to make fun of Christian traditions, Jesus Christ Superstar. Again, it's a very interesting musical, but it is certainly not a musical that is meant to be subversive of sort of basic Christian ideals. Well, at the Hollywood Bowl, they decided they were going to cast Cynthia Erivo as Jesus Christ. Now, there are a few problems with this. One, Cynthia Erivo is a woman. Jesus Christ was a man. Two, Cynthia Erivo is black. Jesus Christ was Jewish. Three, Cynthia Erivo describes herself as a queer bisexual. Jesus Christ was not, to say the least. So you are taking all the things that Jesus Christ was not, and you are turning them into a thing the left wishes Jesus Christ were. The whole goal of this production at the Hollywood Bowl is to be completely subversive of Christianity and to supplant traditional values with the values of the far left social sphere. And you can tell in the theater critic Charles McNulty's review over at the LA Times, quote, Cynthia Erivo, a noted theatrical divinity, redeemed the title of Jesus Christ Superstar at the Hollywood Bowl last weekend in a magnetic, heaven-sent performance that established God the Savior as a queer black woman, as many of us suspected might be the case all along. Divine dispensation allowed me to catch the final performance of this revival of Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice's 1971 breakout musical. I returned from vacation just in time to join the pilgriming hordes carting cumbersome picnic baskets and enough wine for a few dozen Sicilian weddings. The vast number of attendees caused bottlenecks and entry points, prompting one wag to crack, "What is this, the second coming?" Now, notice all of the extraordinarily seething comments of hatred for Christianity just in the first two paragraphs there. Everyone suspected all along that God the Savior was a queer black woman. She is a divine personality. Idolatry, right? She's a theatrical divinity. It was only divine dispensation. It was the favor of God that caused him to catch this performance of Cynthia Erivo. The headliners, Erivo as Jesus and Adam Lambert as Judas, certainly have sizable fan bases, but so too does the subject of the greatest story ever told, a Messiah whose following has few equals in the history of the world. The hard-charging exuberance was appropriate for a production that went back to the concept album roots of a rock opera. And again, he goes on to talk about Cynthia Erivo and the magic of a queer black woman playing Jesus. And by the way, Adam Lambert who is openly gay playing Judas. And so the whole idea from the left is that the entire story of Christianity must be flipped on its head. And actually, all of the value systems that Jesus stood for, it's really just about social leftism. Philippe Bassouz, Mary Magdalene, brought a probing, tentative, and profound intimacy to her adoration of Erivo's Jesus. In her exquisite rendition of I Don't Know How to Love Him, the tenderness between Mary Magdalene and Jesus, at once earthy and ethereal, deepened the expressive range of the love between them. Now, the reason I point this out is because the imagery that emerges from this performance of JC Superstar is astonishingly paganistic, truly subversive, right? That is the goal of the thing. That is the entire goal of the enterprise. Here is some of the video of Cynthia Erivo performing as Jesus Christ in a performance in Hollywood.
I'm thirsty. It is finished. Into your hands, Father, I commend my spirit.
And of course, much of the imagery of her on the stage, Cynthia Erivo also has a particular physical appearance. She's extremely gaunt at this point, and she's bald. And so, again, this is like counter typecasting of the highest possible order. And it's being praised by people like Jane Fonda, of course. She appeared transported by a powerful internal force of reverence and the awareness that she had to die. I was moved to tears. Her body at the crucifixion looked like El Greco's painting, Christ on the cross. What an inspired piece of casting. Just seriously, like ridiculous stuff. We'll get to more on this in a moment. First, the system isn't broken. Sometimes it's rigged. Banks get rich. Well, you stay buried in debt. That's actually how they make their money. PDS Debt has helped hundreds of thousands of people flip the script on credit cards, personal loans, medical bills, and high-interest traps. They know how to beat these companies at their own game. Your money, your future. It's time to take it back with PDS Debt. PDS Debt doesn't just crunch numbers and call it a day. They actually take the time to understand your specific situation and build a plan that works for you, not some cookie-cutter approach. And here's the best part. They don't care what your credit score looks like. Whether it's pristine or completely shot, they're focused on one thing, helping you save more money, crush your debt faster, and finally start keeping more of what you earn instead of handing it over to creditors every month. They've built a reputation by actually delivering results, and that's why they have an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, thousands of 5-star Google reviews, and perfect scores on Trustpilot. When you're drowning in debt, you need someone in your corner who knows exactly how to fight back, and that's what PDS Debt does for their clients every single day. And I have friends who've gotten in debt. It's absolutely brutal. It wrecks your life, but you can save your own life by giving them a call. You're 30 seconds away from starting the process of being debt-free. Get your free assessment. Find the best option for yourself right now at pdsdebt.com/Shapiro. That's pdsdebt.com/Shapiro, pdsdebt.com/Shapiro. I mean, here is a video. This is supposed to be Jesus and Judas. Okay, this right here is supposed to be Jesus and Judas. Now, I'm not a Christian, but obviously I have great respect for Christianity. I've encouraged probably at this point tens of thousands of people to actually go back to church, and many, many people to move back toward their belief system. Does that look like Jesus and Judas to you? Or does that look like a queer bisexual black woman and a very, very gay man cosplaying as Jesus and Judas? Is that looks like to you? The reason this is important is because the backlash to that is one of the things that is driving America's politics right now. The backlash to the left-wing view that everything must be subverted. Church must be subverted. Christianity must be subverted. Heterosexuality must be subverted. Whiteness must be subverted. All of these things, quote unquote, must be subverted because they are all emblematic of an evil system of power. That is the purpose of subversion, after all. That is why the backlash. That is why when Donald Trump said, make America great again, all he really meant by that was stop this stuff, stop this crap. And so Donald Trump represented a giant pulsating orange middle finger to all of this nonsense. And so on the one side, you have Jesus Christ, Cynthia Erivo. And on the other side, you have the cultural controversy surrounding Sydney Sweeney. Sydney Sweeney is all-American, right? She just is. Sydney Sweeney is a throwback to every cheesecake star of the 1940s. She's the kind of woman who was painted on the front of World War II bombers. That's what she looks like. She looks like a pinup girl from 1944, Sydney Sweeney. She grew up in rural areas like Spokane, Washington. Spokane is closer on its border to the rest of the sort of Republican Midwest. And so she grew up in those circumstances. And unsurprisingly, her values sort of reflect that. So it turns out that Sydney Sweeney, when she moved to Florida, she's registered as a voter in Florida and she's registered as a Republican. Now, there's nothing in Hollywood that gets people's goat more than being a registered Republican. This is just the worst. How dare Sydney Sweeney be a registered Republican in the state of Florida? Now, first of all, welcome to Florida, which is awesome. My home state, it's great. We have lots of registered Republicans down here. It's terrific. I'm personally responsible for probably tens of thousands of people moving down here as registered Republicans, including dozens of members of my own family. But Sydney Sweeney being a Republican shouldn't be that big a deal, right? In a country that is at least 50% Republican at this point, why shouldn't Sydney Sweeney, who is now a popular actress and advertising icon, why shouldn't she be a registered Republican? But this is just a reinforcement, according to the left, of all the stereotypical Nazism of the right. Right? Sydney Sweeney, when you look at Sydney Sweeney, just visually, obviously she's a beautiful woman, she's a beautiful young woman, but there are lots of beautiful young women in Hollywood. What is it about Sydney Sweeney that really drove the left insane? Well, one of the things about Sydney Sweeney is the feeling that Sydney Sweeney is not of them. She is not a left-winger. And this is nothing new in terms of the left's perception of the right. See, it's not just that the left wishes to uphold the values and rights of the marginalized. It's that they wish to recenter the marginalized and to turn the mainstream, the quote-unquote normies, into the marginalized. And so they must attack anybody who is not, quote-unquote, of them. This is why, for years, every couple weeks on Twitter, Chris Pratt would randomly just trend. Why? Because Chris Pratt, the very famous actor, is not of the left. It doesn't mean that he's a rabid right-winger or anything, but because Chris Pratt was not openly saying all of the idiotic nostrums of the left, from sort of BLM to LGBTQ plus minus divided by sign, because he wasn't saying all that, that made him verboten. That made him bad. He needed to be targeted. And the same thing here happened to Sydney Sweeney, but it's now backfiring because Americans have had enough of this crap. Look, Sydney Sweeney, I think that she is becoming increasingly popular specifically because she is not doing all this stuff. There's a video that emerged on social media yesterday of her at the shooting range. And I got to say, I think most Americans are like, this is kind of awesome.
Wow.
9:21.
Oh my God, girl. Was it your first time? That was really good.
Okay, so kind of awesome, right? Kind of awesome. And listen, if you live in a red state, your wife or your girlfriend probably knows how to shoot. My wife's actually a shockingly good shot. Like, that's great. There's nothing wrong. Not only is there nothing wrong with that, there's something kind of great about that. So the backlash to Sydney Sweeney for being a pretty blonde white girl with blue eyes who can shoot a gun and isn't a registered Democrat is the reason that Donald Trump is president. Not her being that thing. The backlash to her being that thing, which is in fact combined with a left-wing perspective that says the actual realities of life must be Cynthia Erivo as Jesus Christ and Sydney Sweeney as Nazi. If that's going to be the juxtaposition, Democrats, you guys are going to lose until the end of time. This is a giant fail. Donald Trump was asked about Sydney Sweeney as registered Republican. Here's what he had to say.
She's a registered Republican? Oh, now I love her ad. Is that right? Is Sydney Sweeney? You'd be surprised at how many people are Republicans. That's what I wouldn't have known, but I'm glad you told me that. If Sydney Sweeney is a registered Republican, I think her ad is fantastic.
You got to love that from President Trump. But that is really, truly one of the big emotional undercurrents of the last 20 years in our politics. The left deciding that everything that was traditionally American was bad, colonialist, racist, and terrible. And the right deciding, and the rest of America deciding, no, actually, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. There are things we can all agree on, or should be able to agree on, like beautiful women are more beautiful than not beautiful women. Or being a registered Republican does not mean that you are a bad person. Or maybe Jesus Christ should not be played on the stage of the Hollywood Bowl by a self-described queer bisexual black woman. Maybe that's just a dumb piece of casting and an insulting piece of casting. Right? That backlash, I think, explains so much of our current moment. And if the left continues along these lines, they will continue to backlash their way into minority status, politically speaking. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.